name is Clarke Jewell. I'm here to represent the Jewell family who have been in this area for 117 years. My grandfather was born in Kirkfield, moved to Lindsay in 1902 and bought property and started a market garden. And he's provided groceries or berries, asparagus, everything in the line of market gardening to Drury's food store on William Street, and LaMantia on Kent Street. He raised 9 children on this farm on St. David Street in Lindsay, and one died at a party, a reunion or something on the north part of the county. He always delivered his berries and stuff down to people in the town by horse and wagon. He was never interested in a vehicle, and he even his wife sometimes delivered when he was busy. I used to pick berries when I was a kid with him, and at that time it was 25 cents a quart for berries, and now we pick for a nickel a quart, which seems rather strange to today's prices. All this market garden was done on 10 acres of land. There was apple trees, there was asparagus, there was rutabagas, there was raspberries, strawberries. They had it all that would be successful. And they raised 9 kids on it in a 7-bedroom house. I remember the old phone number that my grandfather used to have, and it was 5-ring W. Grandpa delivered mail by horse and buggy. And in the wintertime he built a box on it, and he'd have a foot warmer in it, and he would deliver the mail by sleigh in this box. Horse, of course. He never believed in cars. The first ride he had in a car, my dad took him for a drive, and he got as far as the corner of Needham Street from where we lived, about less than a block, and he tipped it over on its side. My grandfather never ride another one again. We had no TV, played cards and games, and that was it. Had no indoor plumbing. It was an old outhouse. In the winter times it wasn't unusual for if you had a glass of water and sat it in the windowsill towards the outside of the house, there'd be ice in it in the morning, so you know how cold it was in the bedrooms at that time. Lived in the house with parents and grandparents. Old Finley oval stove heated the house in the kitchen, and there was a coal burning furnace in the basement which heated the rest of it. They had a cistern in the basement which held the overflow of rainwater from the roof, and it provided them with water for watering their plants and stuff that they had at that time. My dad, during the Second World War, took telegraphy classes at the Academy Theatre for during the war. Just it never was used. He was a farm person. He was providing food, so he wasn't really necessary to go to war for anybody. So my dad worked at the alcohol plant, which was Lindsay Street North, Standard Chemical across from really Lindsay Street North. There used to be, Lindsay Movers was there for a while, and there used to be a butcher shop, or I should say more than a butcher shop, was where they killed and everything for the animals. Was up in that end too of town at that time. My mother was a Sunday school teacher at Queen Street United Church, and they had to be there every Sunday. When I went to school, it was in Queen Victoria School on Crandall, just off of Crandall Street in Lindsay, which across the street was the Orange Crush building at that time. That's where it was made. It was such a small little operation that I guess that's why it didn't survive. When I went to Queen Victoria, we used to practice ball sometimes on the grounds of the school, but other times we were across the road in the park, in the Kiwanis Park, straight across from it. Crandall Street had about 5 houses on it, which ran straight off of the Victoria School lot. Of course, the Crandall at that time ran into Sinster Creek, which is an old creek that's still dead, still runs through there. But it was quite a bit different world at that time. We used to walk to school, and then all the time there was no buses. So then in about the month of June, when they got near the end of the year, we'd go barefoot to school. You know, it got pretty deadly because that's when they started tarring the roads. You had to be careful. Took Army cadets when I was in high school. It was mandatory at that time unless you had a health problem. Quit school at age 16, had to get a job. We used to fire rifles in the rifle range in the lower part of the armory at that time when we were going to high school. You had to shoot to qualify for different prizes. And there was a Kiwanis pool in where the high school property is today. My first job in Lindsay is I unloaded rail cars for Master Feeds on King Street at an old mill park they had there. The train came in there and they could unload from that. Then they were taken to Master Feeds on the Kent Street East and ground into chop for the farmers for feed. Of course, the Lindsay were a big thing. They came into Lindsay to behind Union Carbide, Abex, all those industries. And I'm not down below on the bottom end of, I guess it would be Lindsay Street North. They had 2 coal places there, and coal was brought in and then it was dropped off there and delivered around the town because that was the main burning fuel at that time in Lindsay. I started my first full-time job at Jewell Printers, which was in the Queen Street Annex beside the church there now, which my grandfather in the Queen Street Church was also a big member and helped build that church. I was never a real great member of it because I was didn't like to be doing things on Sunday that I didn't want to really do, and that was the main thing. You had to go to church or else. Went to Rosedale Plastics Container Division, which was over on King Street. It was an old farm machinery and manufacturing factory we were in at that time. It's all houses now and apartments. I worked at Abex for years. I worked at General Motors for 3 years, and I didn't like that. It was too automated for me. I wanted something different every time I was doing something, not doing the same thing every day for the same reason. And I moved, came back to Lindsay then and worked at Uniroyal out at, which is still there, it's Armada Tool now. And when after that, I quit there and went back to, went to Avex Industries, worked there for 22 years until it closed. And we used to go dancing at the Embassy Dance Hall. And that time was out where the plaza is now, where not exactly at the new mall, but it was in that area, and it was all sort of a low area, and I remember it was pretty muddy in the spring when we used to go there. It moved from there out to 36 Highway and then burnt down. There used to be a candy stick factory too at Highway 36, which was part of the old dance hall. When they moved out there, they basically took over from the dance hall, or from the candy stick factory, turned it into a dance hall, and then Dave's Diner was there too at the front at one time. Kent Theatre was at the foot of Kent, right beside Academy Theatre, the Victoria School lot. I remember the old bus station behind the Grand Hotel. Jewell's restaurant was the center for the depot, where you waited in the waiting rooms and stuff for to get the bus to come in. Then it moved to Colburn Street up where near the water tower, Colburn Street East, the bus station. At that time, Barkham Chemical was operating just on the other side of St. David's Street, just in behind Avex Industries. And it was provided a rail line there too. Probably a lot of people have never known of Barkham Chemical. The old dump site, of course, is still there on the end of Lindsay Street North. It's a park on it now, but the first dump I remember in Lindsay was in Elgin Park, where the school is and where the lawn bowling thing, and then another park is there now to this day. The town boundary was at Needham Street and 36, 3 houses south of Needham. That was all there was when I lived up there. The hockey arena at that time was at the current Value Mart site in Russell Street in Lindsay. Silverwoods was at Victoria Avenue, where the rail line came right in to meet it along the thing to pick up milk and cream and deliver. You used to have horses and wagons delivering Silverwood's products around Lindsay, and the horses knew the route better than some of the men that were delivering the milk. Fee Motors was part of the Grand, laneway between the Grand and the lot near McDonald's. Car lot was near McDonald's for Fee Motors, which is out on Kent Street West. Beaver Lumber was out there too. Canadian Tire was at the current White's location on Russell Street. MacArthur's Funeral Home is at Lindsay and Russell Street. Shirt and Pajama Factory is where the condos are going in now on the Skugog River on King Street. LaMantia restaurant, we used to go there after school, and sometimes we'd go down at lunchtime till Ma Tojo told us we shouldn't be going there anymore because we weren't buying enough. We were just taking our own lunch and eating it inside. So Oliver's Lane at that time was the Ops Municipal Office, which is in behind, which is parking lot now behind the buildings on Kent Street, on between that and Peel Street. Baker's School, of course, is where the new brewery is now. The Pie-Eyed Monk, of course, I remember Gregory's Drug Store. Nobody can forget that in Lindsay. That was the mainstay in town. One time, Langdon's used to have what they called the frozen locker storage because nobody could have had freezers and fridges weren't much of it, so they would take their beast there when it was killed and they'd store it there and then they'd pick it up from there. Of course, Woolworths was in Lindsay. The Benson Hotel, my mom and dad met there. Mom and my mother worked there. The Royal Hotel, of course, now is on the end of Kent, right across from the Academy. The band shell in Victoria Park was closer to Kent Street. AMP is where LaMantia is now on Russ, just out down behind the bowling alley. Loblaw's current home at that time was at Home Hardware in Kent Street. Train station on Caroline Street was CPR. Walked by it every day on the way to work at DL Printers when they were in the Queen Street Annex. Took rail tracks all the time, winter, summer. Canada Crayon building was operational at this time too. There were no stoplights anywhere in the town. Deado's is where it is an empty lot now, is on Kent Street. It was behind Value Mart when it burned. Pool Hall. It was Rue Morris, was beside the Academy Theatre and one of the stores in Lindsay on the end of Kent. Remember the old post office downtown? Had to walk upstairs to post a letter. St. Dominic's Schools were the current location of White's. North Iron Bridge was north of Lindsay and ran the Port McNichol rail line, ran through it, take grain up to Port McNichol for storage and work. Springdale Garden was all open fields. There were no diesel trains at first. Wellington Street Bridge at that time, which is under construction now, lifted up by a weight system. There was a marina at that time located where Van Halterns was owned by Wilson. Nurses Hospital was located at Colburn Street, and Angeline's house was moved to the Ken Reed Park area. Hickson Sale Barn was in where the Giant Tiger Plaza is, which was kind of different. It was kind of, at that time, you'd go by and you hear cows and that moving. It was that much of the country. Jewell family reunions were held for 65 years plus. I think that's about it.